Hello, thank you for joining us today. The Group 5 Business Intelligence team is going to present the findings of our latest exploration of OkCupid site users. Our team is comprised of Adrian, Mark, Philip, and myself, Ife. The scope of the work we did was to first evaluate OkCupid data and find unique insights to present to you, our marketing leadership. We enrich the data with supplementary sources to augment our research approach and see what interesting relationships we can uncover. We then identified interesting data correlations that shed light on what we believe are new marketing microsegments and persons that present a new opportunity for our business. And lastly, we'll recommend at the end of this presentation next steps that we believe our marketing team can take. For an executive summary, our findings show that location, income and education, age and ethnicity, and gender are 4 central data points that emerge with interesting patterns and clusters. Location was unique in that it showed concentration in a small geographic region. Income and education was interesting in that levels of reported incomes were relatively homogeneous. And age and ethnicity showed the population was distributed between 26 and 37 years old, with most users being white. And gender-wise, the data skewed heavily towards male. And now Adrian will walk through our initial data analysis.
Thank you very much. So basically what we have, the initial stage was for us to get to know the data, see what the data capabilities were and understand it. So this is basically a basic setup of 22 variables in the original data, divided about different spectrums of each observation that represents a person. We initially look at the data and try to find what were the strengths and what were the weaknesses of the data. We did some cleanup to try to clean some of that data, and then we decided to add to it by adding additional data sets to enhance the capabilities of our research. One important aspect that we did was we added an address and latitude and longitude data to allow us to do some geospatial analysis and try to understand how that data was distributed in a geographic basis, and also play with the idea of adding additional census data to try to understand how the overall data fits in different perspectives, in addition to what it was originally provided. It's important to understand that one of the things that we found is that there's some weaknesses of the data. We had to clean up a considerable amount of NAs. And then we also made some data transformation to make sure that the data, the categories were extends, and we try to simplify the categories, for example, in religion and scholarity as well, to try to have a much more simplistic analysis so we can dig deep whenever we need to, but at the same time have an overall view. So this is an example of how the data were received. We see that there's a lot of missing values, for example, and we achieve different aspects to solve it. For example, income, we use a mean to fill up the missing values. Others we just eliminate. So we give each feature a different treatment to try to complete it. On the right-hand side, you see the distribution of the data that we initially saw, which looks somewhat well distributed around the country, but when we look at the frequency, we saw that's a different story that we will discuss later. So the next group, Philip will talk about the next steps.
Yes, thank you. So after we did our initial EDA, we looked at the findings, and after cleaning the data, we discovered that some interesting correlations that may be helpful from a marketing perspective. So first and foremost, In our analysis, we discovered that the majority of the ages of the OkCupid users in the data are within a certain range. In fact, half of the profiles are between the ages of 26 and 37, with the median age being 30. Even though the male profiles make up 60% of the data compared to 40% for the women profiles, they both have similar age distributions. And in the blue chart, it can give us a great visualization of that there is a decline in the number of profiles as the age goes up from 30 in the numbers by ages chart right here. Yeah, so in this finding, we looked at the age or the height of the profiles, and what we found here was there was a lot of error in the data just because of common sense wise. We found that some of the heights didn't make any sense, such as some of the heights being 1 inch. But anyway, our findings were that the first Q data was 66 inches, which is 5 feet 6 inches, and the median was 68 inches, which would be 5 feet 8 inches or 5 feet 8 inches. And then the mean was also 5 feet 8 inches, with the third Q being 71 inches or 5 foot 11. And the max, again, here's with the error. It's very doubtful that someone was 95 inches or 7 feet 11 inches. And we had 3 NAs in our data. In this data, we had the income. And again, with the missing values, there was many of the values are missing. We had upwards or more than half of the data points were missing for this, but from what we could observe, most of the income of our profiles is between around $100,000. So $104,000 was actually the median for the ages, and then the upper end went all the way up to $1 million, and the lower end was actually 20,000. And you can see in the second graph that there's a huge spike in the income of the profiles around 100,000, and then it goes down very quickly from there.
All right, so this is Mark, and I'll be taking over the findings from this point forward. In this segmentation, we're looking at the largest markets by zip code. And what we've noticed is that there are a large concentration of subscribers in 3 specific zip codes. In fact, there's more than 70% of those subscribers, OkCupid subscribers, in those 3 zip codes. This is where your audience is and where you can continue to market OkCupid. In those 3 zips being 94102 in San Francisco, 94704 in Berkeley, and then 94612 in Oakland. Now, one of the other things that we wanted to show on this particular slide for you in your consideration is that your non-straight audience represents an average of 16% across these 3 zip codes. And while your straight audience is 84%, so again, you have to know your audience and how you're marketing to it. So therefore, we wanted to present those findings to you as well. The breakout between your male and female, your ratio is 2 to 3, with the female being approximately 40% and then your male being 60%. So as we look at the next slide, again, we're doing segmentation by postal code. And we're still looking at those 3 largest. So over the next 2 slides, you'll see again those 3 most active zip codes. And in this particular slide, what we're attempting to show is that those either working on or graduating from a college and university with a bachelor's or a master's degree are actively social and they want to be connecting with others. Again, segmenting your audience by postal code against the dimension of higher education, we can see there's an interest with this group to be social and to look to OkCupid for help in finding that someone special. As we look at the next slide, we talk about the findings within Berkeley. And again, based on these findings, OkCupid has the opportunity to replicate and market to other markets with a college or university within that community. What we see happening in Berkeley, zip code 94704, is that you've got multiple colleges and universities in the area. You've got UC Berkeley, you've got Berkeley City College, Vista Community College, Dharma College, etc. And there are opportunities for you to be able to replicate and market to these other universities. So while these three markets are your most active right now, there's the opportunity to have them be even more active by penetrating the other universities and colleges, either within that same zip or outside of that zip. So I'd like to transition back to Philip for some key findings, and then we'll continue.
Yes, so key findings, as Mark was saying, the data is centered in the small area of San Francisco, and we would suggest that possibly expanding out of that area and into different markets in different areas. And then in terms of the income and education of the profiles, they're pretty much the same in that the people that have profiles are usually educated and have an income around $100,000. So marketing to someone who fits that profile is advantageous. In terms of age, a lot of the profiles are between the ages of 26 to 37. So that would be your target market. I would suggest going out and marketing towards the younger generations through possibly social media platforms. And most of the users are white, so I would suggest maybe tapping into a more ethnic data type. And then gender, again, 70% of the profiles are male. I would suggest, or we would suggest, that you keep tapping into the male market, but at the same time, in terms of longevity of OkCupid, possibly marketing towards more females. And then, so now I'd like to turn it back to Mark for the caveats.
Thank you, Philip. And we appreciate those key findings. And as we look at those key findings, we have to be aware that there are some caveats which we need to address. The data certainly represents an interesting opportunity for more analysis. However, we need to be careful not to generalize or extrapolate based on this data to other areas. And the second point being that also some of the categories were too broad. We mentioned that earlier, and need to be narrowed down to allow us to work with the data that we have. And so we'd like Ife to provide you with those next steps.
Thanks, Mark. And so in conclusion, we have two key steps for the team. Firstly, analyzing what worked in previous marketing strategies and which segments were targeted, then taking this approach and duplicating it in other areas around the country. This will allow for a safe scaling strategy with known techniques based on previous success models. The second is to explore modeling opportunities that the data presents and see what else the data uncovers as points of inspiration for new segments or clusters to build a marketing expansion and customer loyalty strategy on.
On behalf of Adrian, Mark, Philip, and myself, Ife, thank you for the opportunity to present our findings to you today. We look forward to continue our engagement with you and your team to help find meaningful information in the data to help you and OkCupid attract more connections.